Welcome to a Spotlight Innovation episode, where we feature two interviews with people who will share how their innovative ideas are making a difference in the palliative care world. Our first guest, Bev Foster, is the co founder and executive director of the Room 217 Foundation. She's an experienced performer, songwriter, and music educator, and we talk about the healing power of music across cultures and how each of us can bring music to our work. Our second guests are Dr. Julie McIntyre and Sheli O'Connor, a retired family physician and active social worker, respectively. They're teaching an education course called Last Aid, which is designed for the public. We talk about what the course entails, how it exemplifies a public health approach to dying, and how it can be used in every community to make a difference. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Xian Xiao.
And I'm Sammy Winemaker. We talk to people who have information and tips on how to unlock a better illness experience.
The waiting room revolution starts right now. I'm excited to welcome Bev Foster to our podcast today.
Yay!
Hey, it's great to be here, Cian. Thanks for the invitation.
Bev, your innovation won Best Innovation this year at the Montreal International Palliative Care Congress. Congratulations. And
Thanks so much, Cian.
Yeah, and it was for this thing called Room 217, which you created. So why don't you tell our audience what that's about?
Yeah, the Room 217 Foundation is a social enterprise. We're very interested in empowering caregivers to use music in their regular practice. And that's really what this is all about. The goal, or I guess the vision we have really, is to enhance and improve the caregiving experience with music. Music's such a powerful human phenomenon, really. And to engage music when somebody is, not feeling well, at the very least. And in this conversation and in this context, we'll say when people are palliative and maybe even imminently dying, end of life, it's just such a powerful tool. It reaches into every single domain. The other thing that's so great about music is that it, in terms of the care experience itself, it can actually support the person receiving care, the individual receiving care, and also all of those in the circle of care. So it's very, very powerful. It has very powerful capacity to reach people in places that other interventions, other tools, other maybe even medications. I'm probably treading a bit of a line there, but it can go places. Certainly, it reaches into the psychosocial and spiritual kinds of domains like nothing else. And one of the huge things in palliative and end-of-life care music can do is help close relationships, what Dr. Ira Byock calls relationship completion. So we can use songs to say thank you, to say goodbye, to say, I forgive you, will you forgive me, to say I love you, especially when people perhaps are medicated or have lost words, even in situations where people become nonverbal. Those songs can almost become the communication piece.
Yeah. And what's the story what was the catalyst for you?
For Room 217? Yeah, great question, because Room 217 is a real room in a real hospital, not far from where I live, where my dad died over 20 years ago now. So it's some time ago. And, as a musician, I had seen music work in a lot of situations. When you are a musician and performing with people, you tune in, you tune into who you're doing music with and around. But I've got to say, Cian, I had never seen anything quite like somebody imminently dying and trying to sing along with us. So, the backstory is Dad had a long, well, actually not too long journey with a terminal illness. And music was the way he and I connected in life. And that was how I could really care for and with him and around him. And certainly when he was like imminently dying, my brothers and sisters and mom, we were around his bedside singing his songs. And we, again, this was life-changing for me in the sense that I just watched what it did I might watch a bit differently how he was breathing, how with the music, how he was trying to make this guttural sound I'd really never heard before as he was subcutaneously morphined. But he was really trying to connect with us and sing with us his favorite songs. And I watched that, how it comforted him, how it connected us. And in a sense, it was, it was sort of that final piece as a family we could do around his bedside. So for us, it was a lot of singing, a lot of humming. If we didn't know the words, we just went la la la. And that was just fine. It was really music being that thing that was present, that bound us together. And so how did Room 217 start from there? Well, here's the thing. I left that night and I just kind of went, Dad's been 18 months in this large Toronto hospital and now in this smaller hospital. Nobody offered him music. Okay, so I was left with two questions, right? So do people not get it? How powerful it is? Or could it be, or could it be that they just don't have the tools? Now, 20 years ago, we weren't pulling our phones out and making playlists quite like we are today. So let's face it, that the accessibility's changed quite a bit. But nonetheless, it's a really important question to ask, because as a family caregiver, and that's really how I come at Room 217 as a musician and family caregiver. I had 4 kids at home. I was supporting my mom, and her mom had dementia at the same time. So we were trying to just juggle all that. And okay, make playlist wasn't on even the top 10 things in my day, if you know what I mean. And so, I get it. I get why it might not be sort of first instinct for people. And yet that experience, it was so profoundly changed me. And it's not like I hadn't done, music for people who were sick, and even sometimes people who were terminal, but I wasn't in the room, right? I would do recordings for them. So I was just, I guess, catapulted into this, just seeking the answers to those questions. That was the first part. And then those early years, we created 2 or 3 albums. I guess it was 3 albums to start with. I wanted to understand how music worked therapeutically, and its capacity, right? So for example, in the music we create for palliative care, we slow the music down to 60 beats per minute to entrain with resting heart rate, which that therefore informs how the people that play, or the performers, actually record the music, right? So we're trying to match breath. That was probably with Dad. That's the thing I felt the most, was how it could accompany his breath. The other really important thing for me is the aesthetic. How do we make the space beautiful? Dad died in the hospital room. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't ugly, but it wasn't beautiful, right? And how do you create that space so it doesn't feel cold and clinical and, I don't know, kind of, that sort of paint color on the wall. And so that's what I'm interested in too, is bringing some beauty into the dying spaces. And that really can change the atmosphere for everybody in the room, including the care providers. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's how we started, and we've developed really 3 prongs to it. And so the first is we develop real products that people can use. So we started in palliative care, and we now have 24 palliative care albums, each an hour long. We also do education. So we just had our 17th conference in Vancouver this fall. And and we have developed a standardized training, a 52-hour standardized training for caregivers. We've trained more than 2,000 in that to date. And we have monthly webinars, and we have a terrific resource page. We do skills days in various care settings, a number of educational, we do a lot of speaking, podcasts, webinars, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then our third sort of area of work, which is newish, is certification. That for us, that would be the bullseye, where we could really now help individuals integrate music care into their regular care practice, and also to integrate music into organizations so that it becomes the warp and woof.
It's incredible. Seems like it shouldn't have taken so much time and effort for the world to realize the power of music in healthcare, right? And in health, living and dying, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for shining a light so brightly on this important tool that I think some of us don't realize can be used in these scenarios.
You have so beautifully articulated our work. Because music is something that we can all use. It's something that's just part of what we do and who we are as human beings. And we've developed this music care approach. That's why it's taken a little bit longer, because when you're entering into health and social care spaces, especially doing some of the stuff we're doing with teaching, you have to actually have the evidence, you have to show it, it just takes time to develop and build. So we've actually developed an approach called the music care approach. And what it means is, and notice it's an approach, it's not a clinical practice. It's much like the palliative care approach, actually. We kind of, actually that inspired it, because everybody can use it, right? Everybody can come to the table. And your interest is in death and dying and comfort. So in music care, our interest is in using music in care. So what we say is it's the intentional use of music by anyone to improve health and well-being for yourself or in the care of others. We've actually developed this approach with quite an evidence-based approach, as a matter of fact. And we've actually developed 10 domains of music care delivery. So you say, what does it look like? Well, it could look like a community musician coming in. So somebody who may be a professional musician coming in to provide some entertainment, or to come in and play in a lobby or in a hospice, like in a hospice area. Or it might be kids in a school coming into a care setting and or a long-term care place. It might be a ukulele group, that kind of thing. Or it could be professional practitioners like a music therapist or other medical practitioners using music as an intervention. It could look like what we would call musicking, people humming, whistling, singing, and not planned at all. Or it could be very programmed. We have 10 of these domains. I just mentioned a few, but we believe there's a lot of space for people to use music. And as you pointed out, you don't have to be a musician to use music. As a matter of fact, what we say to people is it's more important that you use music as presence.
The average person who wants to infuse music into the experience of either caregiving or caring or being a patient, how does one do that? Do you have any tips for someone who doesn't, like, I'm not a musician, I have no music abilities. So how would someone like me bring music into the experience of patients who are living with progressive illness and dying from them?
Couple of tips. First one for me is humming. A lot of people, especially with things like The Voice and American Idol, people are intimidated sometimes to sing. So just hum. Humming as presence is so important. And if you can actually sync up your humming with people's breathing and what we call entrainment, you actually connect with them in sync, right? And I've watched it before where you can actually hum or breathe in sync with somebody and actually alter their breathing, speed it up, slow it down, calm them down, right? So humming is a great way to engage in music care. Another way is to share a significant song. That's really, for palliative care, that's awesome, because that could be part of legacy building, life review, that kind of thing. So just that opens up all kinds of conversations, listening to a song together, but just even sharing that significant song opens up a person's narrative. And that's really important too. Certainly there's playlists. People can create very curated playlists and that sort of thing. So those are just a couple of strategies, but I mean, we have dozens of strategies like that.
I love that you call it a music care approach, because we talk so much, like you said, about a palliative care approach, which is this idea that you don't have to be a specialist to provide palliative care. Well, you don't have to be a musician, professional musician, to bring music into the care. I really love that. Recently, one of my patients told me, who is breathless, what he does to treat his breathlessness is he sings. And when he sings his old country, not country music, in his old country, I think it's Italy, when he brings out the songs from his past and he sings them very slowly, it paces his own breathing, which I thought was super cool. And I wanted to tell you one more thing, that my husband, who's a surgeon, he plays music in the OR, and everyone who works in the OR and the patients have commented that they love that he's brought music into this very scary, sterile, high stress place, and makes people feel more comfortable.
Well, and that's just a really simple thing, isn't it? And makes the OR room more beautiful, right?
Bev, I am. Can you tell us more about the piece of work that you won the Innovation Award for?
Yeah, sure. So, I told you one of the areas of work is around creating actual products or music care resources for people to use. On the palliative care side of things, we started by using Western music. I mean, it's what I'm familiar with. It's what our team, at the beginning was familiar with, and it's been great. But, palliative care physicians and workers at the conferences said, we love this stuff. Can you give us something for boomers and for newcomers to Canada? Right? This was probably about 10 years ago. And they just said, we have new populations coming in and we just need music that would be appropriate. So, here's the one thing I know is, my cultural competency was limited. When you're talking about doing, music for newcomers to Canada, I needed help. So that's, we decided we were going to make a collection. So a collection for us is 6 albums around, intercultural kinds of sounds, right? And so, yeah, it was really interesting. So I hired a couple of guys to help with this. One is a music therapist, and the other is a music producer, musician, and they both are into world music, and they're very skilled at this. And so we had to sort of do this design, right? So we figured out what soothing sounds were through focus groups and we hired master musicians from these various cultures that we identified. And then we made 6 albums, and it was just really, really a cool process. So the innovation that I pitched was really about our process, because what we believed was the process we used to this was a creative process, but actually we're kind of going, I think that this listen, co-create, share process could actually be a pathway towards more intercultural, projects, offerings in palliative care for sure, and in health and social care in general. So it was really quite a powerful, it was quite powerful for us as a team. We had I think 30 musicians involved in the project. And they were all it was so meaningful for everybody, because everybody's culture deals with death and dying, right? And so to learn about how the various cultural groups, sort of what's a soothing sound and that sort of thing. And I just learned so much about intercultural collaboration, and that, when you come in a sense humbly with humility together and collaborate, you just get something better by working together. So that was our project.
So what were the kinds of sounds, and where can our listeners find this music?
But you can find that on our website, actually. There's a poster there, we presented this, and we charted all, because every album probably had at least 6 or 7 types of instruments that were sort of representational of their cultural sounds. Because instead of using iconic songs, we used iconic sounds, right? Because say in a place like East India, that music, it was probably more important that we use the sitar for that group, because that sort of represented that sound, that cultural sound. So people can go on our website and find the sounds. You can absolutely purchase if you do hard copy on our website, or if you want to stream it, it's on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. It's on all of the streaming services. And the collection, of course, the art, we put all of our music under the artist room 217. If they want to get the music, they can access it off of our Music Care Connect app, where all of our products are now digitally available. So you can get the app that's called Music Care Connect off of Google Play or the Apple Store.
Can you just leave us with what has the impact been? You've been doing this for a while. You did this new project with different cultural sounds. Like overall, like what has your take home been on the impact of all this work, and what sort of keeps you motivated to keep doing it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, I guess I'm probably even more passionate today than I was 20 years ago. I mean, I see the results. I was speaking with somebody in a long-term care home this week in BC, and she's taken our training, and I just watch how it changes her day in engaging with residents, nonverbal residents, but she's learned how to engage them with music. And she would say, I'm tone deaf, but she has learned how to just music and to not get too concerned about having to perform in the right key and all that kind of stuff, just using strategies for engagement, that sort of thing. I think some of the, I mean, in terms of the impact, we're very specific about impact. So I could show you like quality of life measures that have been impacted, like reduced agitation and pain distraction and that sort of thing, or social cohesion with the singing programs. Every one of our programs is that. But I think, what keeps me going is I want to see music become more of a primary approach to care. Mm-hmm. We've gone backwards. I mean, with COVID, we've just gone backwards. And I believe music is that thing that can actually get us back on track to a more human and social model of care, because music is such a human phenomenon. But I mean, that's what gets me up in the morning and keeps me going.
Bev, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best in your work.
Now let's welcome Dr. Julie McIntyre and Sheli O'Connor to the show to talk about how they are bringing a public education course called Last Aid to Canada. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
It was a quick hi.
Pleasure to meet you both.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, we're excited because we wanted to use some of the episodes this season to feature other really great innovations and projects that fit with our philosophy of sharing the power and educating the public. So we're excited to talk to both of you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And we'd love to hear about this program that you're involved in called Last Aid. It's a palliative care education program. Tell our listeners about it.
We need to clarify that we didn't start Last Aid. Last Aid was, I think, a PhD thesis project by a German palliative care physician, George Bollig, in 2008. And he started the courses. The first course was in 2014, and they've been rolling out in 20 countries now. So we're just the ones who have tried to bring it to, starting in Ontario. If we can, we'd like it to spread across the country.
Yes, this program, Last Aid, is so interesting to us because it's designed for the public. And as you know, the waiting room revolution is all about engaging the public. I'm curious, what made you want to teach this? And how is it different than what you were teaching before?
And I thought to start, if that's okay. It's the sweet spot, Sammy and Sian. I've been in community work for 30 so years. And I, just like Sammy had said in her podcast, people are saying, I wish I'd come here sooner. I wish I'd known this. We're getting referrals on Fridays for people who have died by Monday. There's lots of fear. You set up a display and people avoid you like the plague if they know you're from hospice. I'm from Hospice Waterloo Region. And this course, George's course, we believe is the sweet spot. It's 4 45-minute modules. And we can talk a little bit about what's covered. But I've searched high and low for how we draw the public in, because I believe the public is are, as you said, the agents of change. They're the ones. I've worked with the healthcare system, got frustrated with the healthcare system. And we did an advanced care planning project for 3 years across the system, including the public. The hospital system was the worst. There was no change happening there, none. So that's why George's is so compelling. It may not be perfect, but it's 4 45-minute modules to entice that worker in the office who's afraid to look up when somebody comes in whose husband has just died, or somebody in the community who has somebody in their family that they don't know what to do or what to say, so they don't go. They don't go and visit. So those are the people we're trying to get.
Oh, I know so many of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the, palliative care has been taught for like 47 years in Canada, ever since Balfour Mount started. And if we wait for the poor healthcare system, especially right now, to provide it, to, the accessibility and the adequacy that we need, it's going to take a long time. So, and as you know, when you don't understand something, and we see it with viruses and vaccines and different cultures, if you don't understand it, you tend to fear it. And so we're hoping that if we can increase the understanding, we can decrease the fear and kind of take back that traditional knowledge about end of life issues, and have the public support each other and with more knowledge.
I'm so curious to know more. Okay, what is this? What is it that we're talking about? That's the sweet spot.
Go ahead, Julie.
Okay, well, the actual course is about 3.5 hours. I like to say it's like a first aid course type of course, but for the end of life. So it's concise. We're trying to, and we've done a lot of kind of rewriting for our own script to adapt it to Ontario, because, if it's in 20 different countries, people are going to have different perspectives. So the first module is on dying as a normal process. And we are trying to just explain, just like birth and pregnancy and labor, there are recognizable stages that you can see, and death has stages too that can be recognized and maybe even anticipated, so that we can understand them, know how to deal with them, not be surprised, not be afraid. And so then we go into the second part, which is planning ahead. We talk about, and as you know, there's a huge misconception about palliative care and what it is and what it is not. So we try and explain that, and hospices, how the network works. And then we get into some advanced care planning and why it's important to have a substitute decision maker, have the important conversations, and so on.
Julie, I just want to mention about the second module. That's where I think your 7 steps fit so nicely in the conversation about the system and about your wishes and have conversations. And I always tell our audiences to follow your podcast for that reason, because it resonates so much with what we're trying to teach people.
Yeah.
We do that too. And the third one is about relieving symptoms. So what symptoms are common, what signs are common at the end of life, and what can you do about them, and what will you see the medical team doing about them. The last module is final goodbyes. So we talk about rituals and traditions and grief, and trying to normalize that process. The teams that are facilitating are usually one doctor or nurse, and then like a social worker or a chaplain, hospice worker, death doula, and so on, somebody who's familiar with the area. And so we're trying to, this year we've rolled out 22 pilot courses.
Yeah, can I just say something about the course that makes it different? I think the context of this is really about compassionate communities. The angle we're coming at this with is, what can you do to support people rather than relying on the medical system? It's not an either or, but it's a together. And so the whole course is set up. We try and use very simple language, not all of the healthcare language, but really focusing in on what can you do? How can you support? What do you do when you see that person in pain? What do you do when they say they're not well? Or how do you communicate with them? How do you listen to people who are struggling? So that's the focus. It's not on when do you go to the doctor and get him to fix it. No offense, Sammy. It's what can you do to support people?
Yeah. And it's about not just addressing the physical side, but the
Mhm.
emotional and the spiritual and what's important to one of the main things that, with advanced care planning, what's important, what gives meaning to their life, and how can you help them have it
Mhm.
at their end, and how can you help them as caretakers help their loved ones.
There's so many parallels with what we're doing. I see it as, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, gosh, we're running along the same tracks here, right? The pieces about normalizing and inviting the public to speak openly and honestly about this, taboo subject, and empowering them and activating them to know that they're part of the potential solution, and that we can look inwardly and not just externally for help, that we are the help we sometimes need as people. We have a lot to harness. We just need the information and someone to help point us in the right direction. And we're pretty powerful, even without being formally trained caregivers. Citizens of the world can be incredible, therapeutic interventions with knowledge.
So you've been training facilitators and they've been delivering it. Do you have any sense of the numbers of in the past, year and a half or so, how many sessions you've done to date?
So we
collectively?
just have these 8 teams that covering the province that impairs medical and non-medical. And so we've just been piloting it. We've been testing it. As Julie said, the bigger challenge for us is that we have these slides that are somebody else's, and trying to adapt them, to the Ontario law or to just the way we speak. So we've been doing that. So I think we've done pretty 25, 30 of these already. I think the challenge is to try and get to the general public, not the people who are have already lost somebody or are caring for somebody at the end of life. I think if we could get further upstream, that would be my goal with this. So that's what we're trying to work on. Yeah.
And I wonder if, you talked about the 4 sessions here, the latter 2 are more about sort of end stage, but we're trying to go upstream. So I wonder what your experience has been when you really talk about death as a normal part, or even the idea of seeing ahead, the zoom out that we call. Has that been well received, or is that still a sort of a hard pill for the public to swallow when you've done these sessions?
I think when you get out into the public, there is such an appetite for this information. I think you might have said that people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And then they hear it, and it's like a light bulb goes on for them. It's just getting them in the room. That is the challenge, is getting them in the room.
So these modules are not necessarily for people who are going through it at the time. You want this to be available to any
I'd like to be in
citizen.
high school, I think. And they have done some pilots with kids, and as not surprisingly, kids seem to latch onto this stuff way better than adults.
Yeah.
So that if we could get it into schools, and not a lot of the people who've been attending are people who are maybe death doulas or work therapists, or know they need to know this stuff. But we're just trying to, we talk about kind of Jane and Joe public, we're just trying to get the average person to have this kind of comfort level.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have the same challenge. We, with our 7 keys, keep infiltrating healthcare conferences, and healthcare providers seem to want to know about it, and we know how to get our foot in the door of healthcare audiences, but it's different trying to get in front of the public and talk about these things. And so I think your challenges are the same challenges that we've had. How do we get this information to the public early on in life, so that we can begin to shift the culture around the fears and trepidation about dying, which is a normal part of being a human. And everyone's going to get there. I know we all know that, but people will get there kicking and screaming if they haven't had a chance to know what happens and what doesn't happen, so that they're not so scared. Exactly. People are so scared of dying. I don't want to be dead. I'm not ready to be dead. But with all the work that I've done, I can honestly say I'm not scared of dying. I'm not ready. I don't want it to happen right now. But when my time comes, I am not scared. I have seen way too many natural deaths that, have silver linings and beautiful moments. And there's a pattern and a predictability to what dying looks like. There is a roadmap that I can have and anyone else can have. It doesn't have to be such a scary unknown, like a black box. I love that you're opening that black box for people.
Although there is, one of the slides is called shared uncertainty. And especially in this day and age when our healthcare system is so stressed, we try and make it clear that, while, especially for advanced care planning, you can say all the things that you'd like, and these are your, your wishes and so on. But there may be a chance that those opportunities aren't going to be available to you. And still, whatever scenario you've talked about with your substitute decision maker, it may not be possible for them to make up. And so it still can be stressful. So, but we think that there's so much, even if that doesn't work out, as perfectly as you would like, there's so much benefit in just learning the knowledge and bringing people together, having the conversation, the whole, we're social animals and we need to discuss this kind of stuff and share.
In a perfect world, we'd have some huge public health campaign, seatbelts, non-smoking, whatever, and to focus on people becoming familiar again with what dying looks like, what death is, because that comfort level is not there. People who I talk to, unless they've experienced somebody dying, they don't know anything about the system. They're shocked when they find, oh, I have to talk to so-and-so, and how do I do this? And how do I get into a hospice bed? Like, all of that stuff is so strange to people because they're just not going there. So we have to do something publicly to help people move forward, and we just haven't gotten there yet.
The other thing I'm realizing is that when we talk about dying, like when we say the word dying, most people leap to the final days and hours. And I think people don't appreciate that dying is a phase. It is a chapter of life that's not just those moments before death. Yes, when breathing changes and there's physical signs of actively dying in the very terminal stage, but a person begins down the descent of dying months before they're actually dead, usually, when it's from either frailty or normal aging or from a progressive life-limiting illness. And I think we ignore the signs of dying because they're clouded by treatment and by, other things, medications and tests and discussions about minutia and the foxholes, like you said, that we miss out on identifying that dying has begun months before death. And there's a lot of time and opportunity to harness. And so one of the things I'm trying to work on is illuminating that fact that when we talk about dying, we're not just talking about the last days when you're bedridden and actively dying in a bed. That is an important and distinct part of dying, but dying happens before that.
And that's the challenge that hospice has, because everybody associates hospice as just those final days, when in fact, if we could get introduced, use that approach sooner, 18 months, 2 years out, we could do so much to help people. Hospice palliative care is preparing for death. And a story. Like, there's nothing before that. It's really hard.
What strategies have been working to go upstream, either from your experience in Ontario or from your colleagues that have been using last aid around the world?
There's an appetite. I'm coming back to the appetite. The appetite's out there. They just don't know where to go to get the information. So my work has all been about the community. So the faith community, the cultural community, wherever we can go, that people will at least listen to us, even just for a little bit. For sure, the long-term care, the family councils and all that sort of thing are there, but that's late in the process. Those to try and get to the Rotary and the Manulife, their lunch and learns, to all of those kinds of things where the public is upstream, and it's a slugging. Like, you're going hard trying to reach those people, just trying to find those communities that are open.
Our strategy with Waiting Room Revolution was to try to really, if we could take a couple more steps upstream and not, we know they're dying, or you have a life-limiting, progressive chronic illness that will not go away, and you will die from it. But we don't have to start with that opener. We're talking about, you have a life-changing diagnosis, and here's what you need to know. And at some point, we will talk about the actively dying process, or all throughout, or we actually already are, but we don't have to color it. I wonder what your thoughts are of that approach.
Yeah.
No, I think you're on the right track. I think everybody has some connection or some interaction with the healthcare system at some point, not necessarily at the end of their life, but at any point, and we're all frustrated with it. And people don't understand how it works, and they don't understand what their role is in it. And I did elder abuse work and worked in geriatrics for years. You had these really nice older adults that did exactly what the doctor told them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the population now. The population that's spending more time with the healthcare system is our baby boomers, is our people who are going to push back, but they don't know how, and they don't know. So I love your seven keys, especially love the reference to the wedding planner. I think like those are things people get. Those are concepts that are nothing to do with death. They make sense. I just think it's excellent. So I think you're on the right track in terms of trying to get it out there.
And there's just generally more interest. I'm my partner that I do the sessions with, Linda Hochstetler, she runs death cafes amongst many other activities and so on. And we used to have just a handful of people at the death cafe, and the one that was just this last Monday, I think she had like 42 people. And we're going to have to start getting bigger venues, because people are, I think, getting more curious, hearing more about it with COVID and
More
MAID
books.
and there's yeah. But the other thing that I think is important about this whole topic is that to go that next level, if we all get more comfortable with end of life issues and thinking about what gives our life meaning, we're going to be thinking about hopefully more of that now, and getting more out of our life now, and having better relationships now. And I know I'm a bit of a Pollyanna maybe, but that's got to be a good thing.
Like, what are your hopes for Last Aid for the future?
I hope we can roll it up across the country.
Mm-hmm. I just hope it opens up the conversation in the community. We need to talk about this, and we need to be comfortable with it. So this to me is a way to do that, piece by piece.
You both have a lot of years of experience as family doctor, as a social worker. What advice do you have for patients and families? I know you're talking about the public health approach in the community, but you probably interact with a lot of patients. So what advice do you have for them about how they can have a better illness experience?
I think one of the things is to make sure that you are talking to your medical team about what is their illness, what's the natural course, what's a good scenario, what's a bad scenario, just to have some information about what they can expect, and then what they can plan for. And then, as we've said, there's tons of resources there, but first of all, as Shelley says, they don't know what they don't know, so they have to ask and realize that it's their right to know that stuff.
I think people need to be their own advocate. I think they need to take that on. As I watch people coming in and out of the healthcare system, they're not asking questions. They're following the plan as a standard plan, as you guys have talked about, and they're not asking for it to be tailored to their needs. They need to be their own advocate. And that starts with understanding and knowledge. Like, the more you know about the system, the better advocate you can be. So that's why I think these kind of courses, these kind of sessions, even if they're just conversations and not a course, people need to get familiar. And the problem is, as you said, Sammy, people don't want to look at serious illness until they have to. But we're all going to be in this system in and out. We have to accept that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't feel that the system is really going to work in their favor, and so they may not just want to go there at all.
I do 100% believe, as you said, we work with the healthcare system, but the public are the ones that need to know this. They need to be the ones who take this by the reins and run with it. Mm-hmm. And that appetite is out there. We just have to find those people that will help us do that.
We need to find the connectors, get it
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
there.
Sienna and I refer to them as the we need the Trojan horse. Like, what's going to be our Trojan horse that we can ride in on and pop out and say, hi, here we are. Guess what? We're going to talk about something else. Yeah. Well, thanks
Julie,
so
Shelley,
much.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
Our pleasure.
Here, thanks so much for asking us.
Yeah,
It's
thanks for including us.
wonderful.
Really
Keep up the
good.
great work. It's wonderful.
you too. Right back at you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can visit our website, waitingroomrevolution.com, to learn more about our movement and how you can join it. The podcast is produced by myself, Kayla McMillan, Valerie Bishop, Shilpa Jyothi Kumar, and Maggie Sivak. Our theme music is Maypole by Ketsa.